I suspect most of you grew up the same way. And one of the most disturbing things about this election, about Trump's rise in politics, is how we seem to have set aside values, basic values, not democratic values or just basic values that we were taught. I mean, we've got a few weeks ago, we had one of the deadliest hurricanes in American history. I was just talking to Roy and Josh about one of my favorite places in the country, Asheville. Just a couple hours from here. Devastated. So President Biden and Vice President Harris, they come down, they're in some of the affected communities, meeting with local officials, trying to comfort families. And as that is happening, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are making up stories about the Biden administration withholding aid, not giving it to Republican areas, giving it to undocumented immigrants, just making stuff up. Even MAGA Republicans on the ground said that's just not true. It was a bald-faced lie. At a moment when people are most vulnerable, most desperate, for somebody, anybody, to try to manipulate and use that for their own gain, when did that become okay? I don't care where you stand on the issues. I don't care what party you're a member of. How can you countenance that behavior? If your coworkers acted like that, they wouldn't be your coworkers for very long. If a family member acted like that, you might still love them, but you wouldn't put them in charge of anything. You wouldn't trust them. And yet, when Donald Trump lies or cheats or shows utter disregard for our Constitution, when he calls our service members who died in battle losers, when he calls our fellow citizens vermin, people make excuses for it, act like it's okay. As long as our side wins, it's all right. And I've noticed this especially with some men who seem to think Trump's behavior, you know, the phony macho tough guy act, that somehow that's a sign of strength. I'm here to tell you, North Carolina, that's not what real strength is. Never has been. I don't care whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. I don't care if you're black or white or Hispanic or Asian or straight or gay. We know better than that. We know that real strength's about working hard and taking responsibility and telling the truth even when it's inconvenient. And that real strength's about helping people who need it and looking out for your neighbors and standing up for those who can't always stand up for themselves. That's what we should want in our daughters and our sons, and that's what I want to see in a president of the United States. And the good news, North Carolina, as the you have candidates to vote for in this election who demonstrate that kind of character, who know what real strength looks like, who will set a good example and do the right thing and leave this country better for it. That's the choice in this election. It's not just policies on the ballot. It's who we are, what we stand for. So whether this election is making you feel excited or scared or hopeful or frustrated or anything in between, do not sit back and hope for the best. Get off your couch and vote. Put down your phone and vote. Vote for Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States and Tim Walz as the next vice president. Vote for Josh Stein and this whole incredible North Carolina Democratic ticket. Help your friends and family members and neighbors and co-workers do the same. Because if enough of us make our voices heard, we will leave no doubt about the outcome of this election. We will leave no doubt about who we are and what America stands for. And together we will keep building a country that's more fair and more just and more equal and more free. That is our job. That is our responsibility. North Carolina, Charlotte, let's go do it. I love you. God bless you. Well, I'm going to cure you of this. They can't hear you booing, but they can hear you voting. So now I've been traveling around the country. I talked to some people. Some people say, well, you know what? I remember the economy being pretty good when Donald Trump first came into office. Yes. It was pretty good because it was my economy. Because I had spent the previous 8 years cleaning up the mess that the Republicans had left. And we had had 75 straight months of job growth, and I handed it over to Donald Trump. And all he did was give a tax cut to folks who didn't need it and drive up the deficit in the process. So do not give him credit for that. That's not what makes an economy strong. The other thing I hear folks say is, well, Donald Trump sent me a check during the pandemic. Hold on. I want to make sure you understand this. First of all, Democrats and Republicans in Congress sent you a check. But also understand, Joe Biden sent you a check during the pandemic. Just like I gave relief to the American people with the help of Congress during the Great Recession. The difference is we didn't put our name on the check. Because it wasn't about feeding our egos or advancing our politics. It was about helping people get by during a tough time. That's the difference. So please do not give him credit for an economy he didn't have anything to do with making work. Do not fall for that okie doke. Don't get bamboozled. Don't get fooled. Do not get fooled when he talks about health care either. If you ask Donald Trump what his plans are for health care, he says, well, first, initially he said, end the Affordable Care Act, right? I mean, he ran on that. We're going to get rid of Obamacare. He didn't really know why, except for the fact that I did it. So he's got a problem now because it's popular. Almost 50 million people have gotten health care because of it. So a couple weeks ago, his running mate, J.D. Vance, do not boo, during the vice presidential debate, Mr. Vance has the nerve to say Donald Trump, and I quote, he said, Donald Trump salvaged the Affordable Care Act. Come on, man. Donald Trump spent his entire presidency trying to tear it up, trying to get rid of it, trying to tear it down. And by the way, he couldn't even do that right. And now, 8 years later, he was asked during the debate with Kamala, if you want to call it that, because that was like Mike Tyson in his prime. That was like knockout. But he was asked by the moderator, well, what's your plan? He said, well, I've got concepts of a plan for how he'd replace the Affordable Care Act. And I thought about that, and I want you to think about this. Let's say your boss gives you an assignment, says, I need it by Friday. And then Friday rolls around, and your boss says, did you finish that project I asked for? And you say, I haven't started, but I have a concept of a plan. You could try it at home. Honey, did you do the dishes? I have a concept of a plan to do the dishes. How's that going over? If it would not work for you, why should it work for the President of the United States? The good news is, Kamala Harris does not have concepts of a plan. She has actual plans to make your life better. She's going to go after corporations that unfairly jack up prices. She's going to make it easier to build and buy a home. She's going to limit out-of-pocket health care costs. She's going to give a tax cut to 100 stands for, not concepts of a plan. Plans, actual plans. Now, if you challenge Trump on his concepts, he will fall back on one answer. This is blanket answer for everything. Blame immigrants. He wants you to believe that if you let him round up whoever he wants, ship them all out, put together these big detention camps, your problems will be solved. I want to talk about this just for a second because we have real issues at the border. We are a nation of immigrants. Unless you're a Native American, somebody in your family came from somewhere else. We are also a nation of laws. We are also a nation of laws. We have to make sure the system works the way it's supposed to, that it's orderly, that it's safe, that it's fair. What I don't understand is this. Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, they're quick to say anything right now that's not working. Well, Kamala's, you've been vice president for 4 years. Wasn't Donald Trump president for 4 years? I know some of you may have blocked it out, but it's true. He was the 45th president. So if rounding up and deporting millions of desperate people, many of them women and children, is the answer to everything, the answer to all of America's problems, why is it that the number of undocumented immigrants was basically the same when he left office as when he took office? He was president for 4 years. Well, I'll tell you why. Because he doesn't have a real plan. He has a concept of a plan, and it's a mean and ugly plan. You know what would actually help bring order to the border and fix our immigration system? A bipartisan deal that Kamala Harris supported, even though it was written by one of the most conservative Republicans in Congress, and Donald Trump lobbied actively and told Republicans not to vote for it because he figured this is an issue that I can use to win an election. We do not need a president who will make problems worse just to make his politics better. We need a president who actually cares about solving problems, making your life better. That's what Kamala Harris will do. And let me say this, because sometimes I think we think presidents can solve every problem. That's not how our system works. We do not have a monarchy. We don't have a dictatorship. So the president's just one among other elected officials in our system of government. So in order for Kamala to get all the things done that need to get done, she's also going to need strong leaders in state houses across the country. Now here in North Carolina, you've been lucky because you've got an outstanding governor in Roy Cooper. He has done a fantastic job. He is a good man. He is a sensible man. He's a hard-working man. He has done an outstanding job leading this state. So now, to continue progress, you need to elect Josh Stein and keep North Carolina moving forward. Josh knows how to get stuff done. As your Attorney General, he's fought for survivors of sexual assault, stood with families that were devastated by the fentanyl crisis, defended your right to vote. And as your governor, he'll do even more, cutting taxes for workers, expanding technical education, paying teachers what they deserve. Because Josh Stein believes that if you work hard and take responsibility, you should be able to get ahead. Now, Josh's opponent believes other things. I do not know where to start with this man. Called the civil rights movement crap, called LGBTQ people filth, self-identified as a Nazi, suggested bringing back slavery. Now, I shouldn't really have to get into all this. I think it's fair to say you do not need a governor who makes Donald Trump look almost normal. You deserve somebody who's going to work every day and fight for you, somebody who has shown that he is up for the job, somebody like Josh Stein. He's been doing it his entire career. You need it in the governor's office. You need it in every office, at every level. I've taken special interest in following the school superintendent race down here in North Carolina. In part because apparently the Republican candidate's been spreading conspiracy theories and thinks I should face a firing squad. So I guess I am self-interested in you do not want, look, I mean, I'm serious here, people. I have friends who are conservative. I have friends who are Republican. We can have differences on issues. But we can't have somebody saying just crazy stuff running your school system, purchasing textbooks, allocating resources for our kids. You need somebody like Mo Green, who's actually run one of the largest school systems in the state And we'll make sure your kids get the education they deserve. And not just because they've got smart policies, not just because they've got an extraordinary track record of accomplishment, but also because they share just some basic core American values that we seem to be forgetting. I mean, it's an example of how frustrating politics can be sometimes, that there's so much crazy just swirling, especially on social media. And so I understand why sometimes people just want to ignore politics. They just want to step away from it. We all know folks like that. Good people, but they go, God, it just seems so nasty. I just don't want to be involved. It doesn't matter. And so complacency is also our opponent here. And whenever I talk to folks who feel just frustrated or disgusted with politics, I don't try to sell them the moon. I'm honest with them. Politics is not going to solve all your problems. Politics will not eliminate all poverty. You elect a president, no matter how well-meaning, they're not going to eliminate racism. You know, you may still be frustrated with your boss. You know, your kid may still act up and do knucklehead things. People you love may still get sick. Politics is not a cure-all. But your vote matters because what politics, what government can do is make your life a little bit better or a little bit worse. So when I was president, we didn't solve all the problems with our healthcare system. But but almost 50 million people got healthcare through the Affordable Care Act. Another 50 million were able to stay on their parents' plan until they were 26. Or they had pre-existing conditions, and before they couldn't buy insurance, and now they can. Somebody you know has health insurance because of what we did. It didn't solve all our problems, but it made your life a little better. Yo, we got somebody who fainted back there? All right, if we get an EMT, everybody, you got to bend your knees a little bit if you're standing too long. They'll be all right. Just give them a little space. This happens. I know y'all been standing around for a while. I'll give you another example. I said how politics can make your life a little bit better. It can make it a little bit worse, too, or a lot worse. So, and my former Attorney General, Eric Holder's here. Outstanding Attorney General. So he'll remember this. In my second term, because we had dealt with H1N1 virus, and then we dealt with Ebola, I had studied the issue. We had gathered together scientists and experts, and there was a prediction that sometime, nobody knew when, there was going to be an airborne pandemic, and we were going to need to be able to deal with it, just like we deal with the natural disaster. So we put together a plan, a playbook for how to deal with a pandemic. And we had what Eric we call tabletop exercises, where we'd get all the agencies together, and we'd work through, all right, what would we do in the event of a pandemic? You know, how are we going to deal with the schools? How are we going to deal with public health officials at the state level? How do we provide information? How do we accelerate the production of viruses? Had a whole playbook, big playbook. Handed it off, just like I handed off that good economy to Donald Trump. I said, here you go. And apparently, it was dropped in the bin. And he ignored it. And 3 years later, the pandemic hits. Now, I want to be fair. No matter who was president, the pandemic was going to be a major crisis. People were going to die. People were going to get sick. Businesses were going to be shut down. Supply lines were going to be messed up. Travel was going to be restricted. This is a once-in-a-100-year pandemic. But if you look at a country like Canada, their death rate was 60% lower than here in the United States. Now, I want you to do the math. Over 1 million people died during the pandemic here in the U.S. 60% of 1 million is 600,000 people. That's somebody's grandmother or grandfather, parent, co-worker, friend. Some of those folks might be alive if we had a competent, caring president who was actually trying to make things better, who was not advising people to inject bleach as a cure. So if somebody tells you this election doesn't matter, explain, no, it does matter. It makes a difference when you have a leader who sees you and cares about you and thinks about you. They don't need to be perfect, but they need to try. They need to care. And remind them that elections are more than just policy. They're also about values, and they are about character. Some of you know, I didn't have a father in the house when I was growing up. My parents divorced when I was 2. I knew my father for 1 month. But you know, I did have a lot of people around me. Stepfather, grandparents, teachers, coaches, and most of all, my mother, who taught me the difference between right and wrong, showed me what it meant to be honest and be responsible and to work hard, to treat others the way I wanted to be treated. And I did not, growing up, always live up to those values. I was a knucklehead like most teenagers. But as I became a young adult, I tried to internalize them. I tried to live up to those values. I suspect most of you grew up the same way. And one of the most disturbing things about this election, about Trump's rise in politics, is how we seem to have set aside values, basic values, not democratic values or just basic values that we were taught. I mean, we've got a few weeks ago, we had one of the deadliest hurricanes in American history. I was just talking to Roy and Josh about one of my favorite places in the country, Asheville. Just a couple hours from here. Devastated. So President Biden and Vice President Harris, they come down, they're in some of the affected communities, meeting with local officials, trying to comfort families. And as that is happening, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are making up stories about the Biden administration withholding aid, not giving it